A child drags a stick across damp earth, not to build, not to hunt, not because anyone asked. The line bends once, then again. Soon it becomes an animal only the child can recognize. A nearby adult notices. They smile for a moment before returning to sharpening a stone blade beside the fire. Nothing has been accomplished, nothing has been produced, and yet, for a few quiet seconds, an imagination has left a visible mark on the world. Most people imagine ancient humans had no time for moments like this, that every sunrise began another desperate race against starvation, that life before civilization was an endless sequence of danger, hunger, and exhaustion. It is one of the most enduring images of prehistory. It is also one of the most misleading, because before asking how ancient humans defeated boredom, we have to ask something even stranger. Were they bored at all? For most of human history, there were no clocks counting the hours, no offices, no schools, no schedules pinned to walls, no endless stream of notifications demanding attention every few seconds. Time did not arrive in neat rectangles. It stretched and contracted with daylight, weather, migration, and memory. A day was not divided by appointments. It was divided by whatever the world decided to offer. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have noticed something unexpected. Many spend far fewer hours gathering food than people imagine. Among several well-studied groups, the average time devoted to obtaining food can be surprisingly modest, leaving long periods for tool-making, childcare, storytelling, social life, rest, and play. Scientists debate the exact numbers because every environment is different, but the pattern appears again and again. Survival was demanding. It was not always constant. That changes everything. Because if survival did not consume every waking hour, then something else occupied the human mind, and the human mind dislikes emptiness. Long before cities existed, evolution had already built a brain obsessed with patterns. Watch someone sitting beside a fire. Eventually they begin arranging stones, tracing shapes, throwing small pieces of wood into the flames simply to watch the sparks rise. Not because these actions are necessary, because curiosity refuses to remain still. Most people think boredom comes from having nothing to do. That isn't what psychologists increasingly suspect. Boredom appears when the brain cannot find meaning in what it is doing. It is less about empty time and more about empty attention. That distinction matters. An ice age landscape was almost impossible to ignore. Every gust of wind carried information. Every distant footprint suggested a story. Every broken branch hinted that another creature had recently passed. The ground itself was constantly speaking. The human brain had evolved to listen. Imagine standing at the edge of an ancient forest. Silence. At least, what modern people would call silence. But listen longer. Leaves move differently when pushed by a deer than by the wind. Birdsong changes when a predator enters the trees. Even insects alter their rhythm as daylight fades. To survive was to notice these tiny changes before anyone else did. Attention was never idle. It was alive. Researchers often describe humans as the ultimate social species, not because we are the strongest, but because our minds became extraordinarily interested in other minds. Who was trustworthy? Who was lying? Who remembered the location of fresh water? Who had fallen in love? Who was secretly angry? Thousands of generations spent their lives solving these invisible puzzles. The greatest mystery in an ancient camp was rarely the landscape. It was the people sitting beside you, and people never stopped generating stories. Perhaps that explains another archaeological mystery. Again and again, excavations uncover objects that had no obvious survival value. Shells carried hundreds of kilometers from the nearest coastline, animal teeth drilled into necklaces, pieces of ochre carefully ground into bright red pigment, feathers, beads, engravings, paint. None of these fill an empty stomach. Yet humans devoted precious time and energy to creating them. Most people assume art appeared after survival became easy. The evidence suggests something else. Art appeared while survival was still uncertain, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Beauty was never a luxury. It may have been a necessity. Some of the oldest known cave paintings lie deep inside caves where sunlight never reaches. To reach them required crawling through darkness, carrying flickering firelight into spaces no one lived in. Imagine the effort, imagine the risk, all to paint animals on stone walls that almost nobody would casually see. Why? Scientists still debate the answer. Perhaps ritual, perhaps teaching, perhaps storytelling, perhaps something impossible to recover. But whatever the reason, someone believed imagination was worth carrying into absolute darkness. That is difficult to reconcile with the image of humans living only moment to moment. Instead, it suggests something remarkable. Even while surrounded by danger, the mind searched for experiences beyond survival, and maybe boredom itself was part of that search. Most animals become inactive once their immediate needs are satisfied. Humans rarely do. Give us food, warmth, and safety. And almost immediately another question appears. What next? This question has built religions. It has launched ships across unknown oceans. It has painted ceilings, written symphonies, invented mathematics, sent machines beyond the solar system. The same restless curiosity that pushes a child to scratch meaningless lines into wet soil. Researchers sometimes call humans information foragers. Just as our ancestors searched forests for berries, our minds search reality for novelty, for patterns, for surprise, for meaning. Perhaps boredom is not the opposite of survival. Perhaps it is what remains after survival succeeds. But that idea creates another mystery. If ancient humans possessed the same restless minds we do, if they experienced long evenings around the fire, if they sought beauty, stories, patterns, and wonder, then what exactly filled those endless nights before writing, before theaters, before books, before music streaming through invisible signals? What did they actually do when there was nothing left to hunt? Because the answer reveals something extraordinary. The first great entertainment in human history was not a game. It was another human being. The first great entertainment in human history was not a game. It was another human being. Long after the hunt was over, after the meat had been divided and the tools laid beside the fire, darkness arrived with remarkable patience. There were no glowing screens waiting to be awakened, no books resting on shelves, no theaters, no radios, only a circle of faces, illuminated by a fire that never stopped moving. Most people imagine those evenings as silent. That is probably the last thing they were, because long before humans wrote stories, we became them. One person stood, another pointed toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Hands became antlers, voices became wolves. A child laughed before the ending was even finished. Some stories explained where rivers came from. Others warned children not to wander too far into the forest. Some were almost certainly exaggerated hunting victories that became larger every time they were told. Researchers studying oral cultures have noticed something remarkable. Stories do far more than entertain. They preserve survival knowledge, strengthen social bonds, teach moral behavior, and allow entire communities to remember events that no individual could have witnessed alone. In other words, entertainment became memory, and memory became civilization. Perhaps this is why the human brain remembers narratives far better than isolated facts. We did not evolve to memorize lists. We evolved to remember people, conflict, emotion, surprise. The structure of a good story may be older than agriculture itself, but stories were only the beginning. Listen carefully around almost any traditional society, and another pattern appears. Rhythm. Someone taps two stones together. Someone else claps. Feet begin striking the ground. Voices rise and fall in patterns that resemble neither speech nor noise. Eventually, everyone joins. Scientists still debate when music truly began. Wood, skin, and plant fibers rarely survive tens of thousands of years, leaving little archaeological evidence. But flutes carved from bird bones dating back more than 35,000 years tell us something extraordinary. Humans were making instruments while mammoths still walked across parts of Europe, which raises an unexpected question. Why would a species struggling to survive spend valuable time making music? Because perhaps survival was never the only goal. Modern neuroscience suggests that singing together synchronizes breathing, movement, and even aspects of brain activity. Communities that moved together often trusted each other more. Cooperation became easier. Fear became smaller. A song could achieve what commands never could. It could turn individuals into a group. The same may have been true for dance. Most people think dance is decoration, something invented after civilization. But dance may be older than cities by tens of thousands of years. Imagine a successful hunt. The danger is past. Adrenaline still races through every body. Movement becomes celebration. Celebration becomes ritual. Ritual becomes tradition, and before anyone realizes it, a culture has been born, not from necessity alone, but from shared joy. Even play, something often dismissed as childish, appears to have held surprising importance. Children chased one another, pretended to hunt, invented rules, changed them halfway through, argued, laughed, started again. None of it produced food. Yet nearly every known human culture allows children enormous freedom to play. Why? Because play is rehearsal disguised as pleasure. A child pretending to track an imaginary animal is quietly training the attention that one day may feed a family. A playful wrestling match teaches balance without becoming combat. Games allow mistakes that reality cannot afford. But humans did something stranger than almost every other species. We kept playing after adulthood. Adults competed, joked, created contests, solved riddles, balanced stones simply to see whether they could. Some carved tiny figurines whose practical purpose remains unknown. Others decorated weapons so beautifully that they became works of art as much as tools. Archaeologists continue uncovering objects that seem almost unnecessary. Miniature sculptures, intricate carvings, personal ornaments, paint carefully applied to bodies and cave walls. These things demanded time that could have been spent gathering another basket of food, yet generation after generation chose beauty anyway. Perhaps beauty itself solved a problem. Perhaps it reminded communities that life contained more than survival. And then there was laughter. Laughter leaves almost no trace in the archaeological record. No fossil record's a joke. No cave painting preserves the punchline. Yet it is almost impossible to imagine humans living together without it. Anthropologists studying traditional societies often observe teasing, playful imitation, practical jokes, and shared humor woven deeply into daily life. Laughter lowers tension, repairs damaged relationships, signals trust. For a deeply social species, humor may have been as useful as another spear. The things that appear least practical may have quietly held communities together, which brings us back to boredom. Most people think boredom is an ancient enemy. Perhaps it is a modern misunderstanding. Our ancestors certainly experienced moments without immediate work, but those moments unfolded inside environments overflowing with people, stories, sounds, weather, animals, memories, and possibilities. Their attention always had somewhere to go. Our attention, by contrast, often sits inside perfectly controlled environments that ask almost nothing of it. Ironically, we may possess more entertainment than any humans in history, yet struggle more than they did to remain entertained. Psychologists have noticed something curious. The human brain quickly adapts to constant stimulation. What once felt exciting becomes ordinary. Novelty fades. Silence becomes uncomfortable. We search again and again. Perhaps the restless instinct that once encouraged exploration now endlessly refreshes the screen. The machinery has not changed, only its target has. The research cannot tell us exactly what an ordinary evening looked like 40,000 years ago. Some mysteries will always remain beyond archaeology. No scientist can reconstruct every conversation beside every forgotten fire, but enough evidence survives to reveal a larger truth. Ancient humans were not waiting for civilization to invent a meaningful life. They were already filling the darkness with stories, with rhythm, with curiosity, with games, with laughter, with imagination. Civilization did not create those instincts. It inherited them. And perhaps that is the greatest misunderstanding of all. We often imagine progress as humanity moving away from its ancient past. But the deeper we look, the more the past seems to be moving with us. The child drawing meaningless shapes in wet soil. The elder telling a story that grows a little larger each winter. The hunters singing beneath unfamiliar stars. And someone today, absent-mindedly doodling in the margin of a notebook during a meeting. They may all be answering the same quiet question. What should the human mind do? When survival finally leaves it alone, perhaps civilization itself is simply the longest answer we have ever given. Because every painting, every myth, every melody, every game, every scientific discovery, every journey across an unknown horizon may have begun with a moment that looked, from the outside, like doing absolutely nothing. And perhaps boredom was never the absence of purpose. Perhaps it was the empty space where imagination first learned to speak. Long before we built cities, before we wrote history, Before we reached for the stars, humanity was already entertaining itself. Without realizing, it was rehearsing the future.